One of the best traits or most important traits of being a great leader is your ability to communicate clearly and concisely to your team in order for them to take action and generate the results that you require. Unfortunately, for many leaders, we put pressure on ourselves to be more of a performer than a communicator. We've split the world into on stage and off stage. And we feel that, well, we're not a great presenter. I could never be on stage and speak to thousands of people. When in reality, we're just asking you for a status update on a project that you're working on. So are there ways that you can become a better communicator? Absolutely. And that's why I'm excited for today's show. Laurie Gilbertson has joined us. She, for many, many years, was a prosecutor in New York City, trying cases, high-level cases. So her ability to communicate was really key. Getting her point across, very, very important to the success of the trial. Well, now she works with individuals and corporations to help take what she learned in those years of trying cases and helping them improve their communications. And we have a fascinating conversation today on tactical skills that you can apply today to make your communication better. So excited for today's show. So let's dive into today's episode of You're in Charge, Now What? With Laurie Gilbertson. Great. So thank you so much for being here. And I wanted to start out our conversation. Your history fascinated me when you came across, my email, and I was looking at you as a prosecutor, fascinating. I don't think I've ever had anyone with that type of experience here. But what you're helping people with is this idea of communication and being able to use your words correctly, clearly, concisely to get your point across, either in some cases, media, presentations, but also for your team. So I'd love to start there. What do you think leaders or most people miss when it comes to how they communicate their points or desires to their teams?
Yeah, people often miss the actual importance of communication. It is really regarded by so many leaders and even so many team members as a soft skill, as one of those things that you're not even supposed to work on it. But everything starts and ends with communication. Are you talking to your team about a new idea? Are you trying to get up in a meeting and put something out there that you want to convince people is a great way for the company to go? Do you have questions even maybe about a task that you have and you want to be sure you get it right? If you can't communicate with your team members as a leader or even as an employee, then how are you going to clarify things? How are you going to know that what you're doing is really what the company wants? How are you going to move ahead? And then how are you going to take advantage of opportunities? We are not telepathic. Leaders cannot telepathically let their team know exactly what they're expecting. And if you don't set expectations and you don't set boundaries, how can a company really function well? And how can people within that company live up to their potential?
That's a great point. I was having this conversation with someone the other day about this idea of, and I love the word that you used, telepathically. They were talking about great leaders get their strategies and share their conversations through stories, right? We're going to paint this picture. And I said to them, well, I think where the disconnect really is I could paint a great story, but to your point, I'm assuming that the listeners are going to get that same image in their head, or they're going to know what to do with the story. We miss talking in actionable terms for whatever reason. So for you, when you touched on that, is that something that we just assume that people are good communicators or bad communicators, and we forget to take it to that extra step to paint that picture of here's what I need you to do?
Yeah, you usually cannot be straightforward and simple enough with people. It's all about knowing your audience and knowing who you're talking to. And the fact that when you're communicating, it's really more about the message you're getting across and the person who you want to take that message in and understand that message, not about you. So, to that end, you've got to kind of set an area in between you and the person you're speaking to or the audience you're speaking to of a collective and common understanding. And you want to be sure that you have that before, say, you paint one of those beautiful visual pictures that maybe works for you, that your audience has no idea. Right? And then you've wasted that. You said something interesting, Glenn, when we started out. You talked about words. What words are you using? And then you also talked about talking. How are we talking to people? Words and talking are just a part of it. There really is that visual communication, that emotional connection with the people who you're speaking with. 93% of our communication, I think that's the statistic, is not actually the spoken part of it. Right. So when leaders are thinking about communication before they, go out and paint that beautiful picture, which, I work with people on, it's a wonderful thing to do. You have to think first about, what is the point of what I want to get across? What is my message here? What do I want, say, my direct report to leave with from this meeting that we're having? Right. How do I want them to feel emotionally? What do I want them to understand? And how do I create a space where we can have a really great back and forth communication and we are communicating on the same level? It's, I don't know that people can see it, but I'm kind of holding my hands going, at odds with each other, where you're just on parallel areas and you're not really communicating. So that's something to even think about before we even get into storytelling, which is a wonderful thing to use, a great tool, but you got to get there.
No, and I love that. So there's two things I want to touch on that, because my brain went two different places. One is when you're saying this idea of seeing visual, how much Zoom really impacted communication over these last 2 years, where everything is very flat, as you said, and we don't have that ability, physicality really to move around. Everything is from, the neck up, and we're just talking, so to speak, and everything is flat. So that's one piece. And then this other piece, I definitely wanted to talk about the Zoom, but then this piece of creating that safe space to have a conversation, versus a lot of times we may feel it's a one-way street. The boss, leader, whoever tells me, nod my head, and I walk out and go, well, I hope I figure this out correctly, because we haven't created that. So let's talk about Zoom first, because if you're helping everyone with communication, and as you said, 90-something% is physicality, how do we get past Zoom, or are we just happy that we're getting out of Zoom? What are your thoughts on this?
Wow. Zoom fatigue is real, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've been living in this for almost 3 years now. And at first it's this wonderful thing that we can be in touch with everyone. And then, as we go along, you realize there is that two-dimensional part to it. So there are a couple ways that can impact that and make it better, because I don't think it's going anywhere. There are so many remote things that are good about Zoom and other tools that we want to keep, but how can we get away from that Zoom fatigue? So one of the things that can make it more visual is something that you're doing as we sit here. You have a great background behind you. Right. You've got some cool things up there and some cool pictures in the back. Thinking about where we are and how we want to present ourselves, not just our bodies kind of two-dimensional in the Zoom background, but what's behind us. Right. I've got, a bookshelf and some depth behind me to make it a little easier to look at. When you communicate with someone, you want to have as few barriers between you as possible. And, I see that background as a way of eliminating a barrier. If you have, your company background with some big logo in the back, it's okay. It'll do. Right. If you have a blurred background because maybe your place is messy, okay, that happens. Right. But being able to personalize it so that when you come on, it's not just you visually, you have this huge canvas behind you to even put more of yourself and make that connection. You know, I'm looking at pictures behind you and we didn't even get a chance to chat. I want to chat about all those things because that's so interesting. And then that forms a connection between us where you can share something that is interesting and personal and impactful to you. And you know, I'm interested and I can learn something. So before we've even started our Zoom meeting and started, you know, the substantive part, we've made a connection. So that's one way. The second way is you talked about, you know, it's just the head and shoulders. And we feel like these disembodied bodies. You can move. You know, I have a standing kind of desk thing that I put on my desk when I'm giving presentations, and it helps your voice when you're standing. And so you can do that. You know, we get very used to the sitting, but you can stand. And that gives you a little bit of movement. It shakes things up a bit, makes it a little more interesting for the people watching you and gives you energy. Another thing that you can do on that Zoom, which is something I'm also doing right now, that helps your voice, because as a friend of mine who is a voice coach said, we're all voice actors now. We're all using our voices on Zoom now, the way she's been doing it for years and years so well. So one thing I recommend to people is, and I'm doing it right now too, is sit on the edge of your seat. If you sit on the edge of your seat, you know, it kind of has your body straight, your diaphragm can get the air in, you can get your voice out better, and you just feel a little more active and engaged.
Yes.
Lastly,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Just one more thing.
Sure.
Our brains don't really work to look at ourselves all day long on Zoom. So there's a great little feature on Zoom. If you go to where the 3 dots are, you know, up on your picture, and you can push hide self view. And then you're not distracted by looking at yourself. And then you can really give your full attention to who you're talking to. So I use that fairly often. I encourage people to use it. It just kind of helps your brain stay focused.
Yeah. And
on where you are.
Well, I love all of those because what we're trying to, I love the idea of the backgrounds because it does breed some conversation points besides just everyone looking the same. But taking it a step further, because what you got my thoughts going is, as a leader, being aware of who's engaging, who's not engaging. I know my children, I have a 15-year-old and soon to be 17-year-old, you know, going through school was very hard for them. You know, my oldest one just doesn't learn that way. I mean, he's still, you know, a straight A student, but it was not easy for him because it was this idea of not participating, not really being able to see the teacher except for the head, and everything was disconnected. And he said, I can't learn this way. I don't like learning this way. It's not I can't, I don't like to. So I think also as leaders, when you're running these meetings for your team, finding other ways to check in on them to make sure that they're connecting. Maybe it's a phone call. They feel more comfortable on the phone. Maybe they're more comfortable with a FaceTime where, to your point, is we're moving, we're not stuck behind the Zoom camera. Because if not, I think some of your people will just go silent because they're afraid to say. Goes back to what your idea of having that safe space to basically raise my hand and say, this is not working for me. How can we spend some more time together so I fully understand what you want? Because just this meeting with 15 little heads, I get lost, I get disconnected, and I'm afraid.
Yeah, that is so true. And the word that you just used with your son, talking about that, the disconnect, is just so real. I mean, I've got three teenagers, 2 the same ages as yours. And, you know, we see a lot of that, and they want to learn. Sure. They want to be connected. I have never seen 3 teenagers so eager to go back to school and go back to in-person school. I never thought I'd see it, but they're hungering for that connection. And, you know, your point about leaders using a different medium, and that's another part, right, of knowing your audience. Is someone, you know, a real introvert where on a Zoom meeting of 15 people, they're going to turn off that camera and not participate. It's going to be kind of worthless for them and for you through nobody's fault, just that personality. You know, why did everything have to become a Zoom meeting? right? All of a sudden, all of these, maybe phone calls that we had, or times you would maybe be walking and talking to someone, all of a sudden they became Zoom meetings. So
Right.
I love your idea of not having to default to that.
Yes.
Just because it's a meeting doesn't mean it has to be a Zoom meeting. What works for everybody?
Right.
What works best, and just knowing your team, just like your friends. Do you want to get on a happy hour call with your friends and drink a glass of wine on a Friday afternoon during the pandemic? We all, I think, connected with some people doing that.
Mhm.
Maybe you're comfortable going to a park and you all could maybe distance at the time and still talk and have that connection. So it's all about just creativity and being
Yes.
open. We don't have to do things a certain way just because they've always been done that way. Just because everyone made it a Zoom meeting doesn't
mean
have
we
to
have
stay
to.
that
No,
way.
and I think that's really, again, folks who are listening, I hope you're taking notes here, because this idea as leaders, we have the ability and the flexibility, and it's sort of the responsibility to try different things, to be able to look at our team. I was having a conversation with someone the other day for the podcast, and he talked about other focused. That was the way he said the skill, not servant leadership. He always thought focused just on your team, where other focus, you're constantly focused on the other people. So that means other departments, everyone on your team, focused on customers. But this idea of really making sure each individual on your team or in your circle is understanding, is receiving, is on the same page, and having that flexibility to say, well, this person I do phone calls with, they want short phone calls. They don't want to be tied down for an hour. Other people, it's texting. Some of my team, it's Google Chat. I don't need to talk, So it's that idea of a tool belt and pulling out what you need for the individual at the right time in order to move the machine forward. I think that, to me, is really one of the keys for leadership, because, as you said, communication doesn't have to be, you don't need to see my face. A text is good. Chat is good. All of that works, whatever that team needs.
Right. And you've hit on such an important point for leadership, which is that a leader can have a certain communication style that they are most comfortable with. But part of being a good leader is being adaptable and flexible, like you said, to your team, and knowing what everybody's got a different communication style that they're comfortable with. Knowing what the people on your team are comfortable with.
Right.
When I start with clients, I will ask them when we're talking about setting certain communication goals, and I'll say, well, in terms of accountability, how would you like me to hold you accountable? Is a text good? Do you want an email? Do you prefer that we set up a phone call every week?
Right.
Do you want to just do the session and then we talk to each other at the next session, and that I'm going to be there holding you accountable at the next one? What works best for you?
Right.
If we don't, going back to the telepathy, wouldn't it be nice if you become a leader and all of a sudden you get that superpower? But we don't. So if you don't ask, you don't know. And so many people are afraid to ask.
Yes, I agree. And you can even take that a step further, because when you're a leader and you're trying to coach and develop your team to add on a new skill, a new trait, something that you're trying to teach them to do, not everyone learns the same way. Someone could give it to me in a manual. Let me read it. I have it. Somebody else is, I need to watch a video. Someone might be, I need to watch you do it, and then I can do it. Or you can just tell me and I have whatever it is. But again, this idea of leadership is flexibility, because and I think you hit it spot on, and everyone understand this. Just because it works for you doesn't mean it works for everybody. So if I learn a certain way, that may be preferred for me, and I should be moving that or communicating that upstream, because if I'm leading a team, I'm on someone else's team and they're holding me accountable. How do I want to learn? But going down, having that flexibility to say, well, here's how everybody wants to be spoken to, communicated to, educated, then you can become more other focused and get the most out of your team.
Yeah. And look, leaders don't automatically have the ability to communicate and to learn in everybody's different style. It's a learning experience for for
Sure.
leaders. And I encourage people to do much of what you're saying, is to kind of embrace that vulnerability. If someone says, I prefer to use Slack, I feel really comfortable on Slack, and your company doesn't have Slack, take a look at Slack,
Right.
see if that'll work. If that's got, maybe that person has a great idea, and maybe since they communicate that way in a good way, maybe other people might like it too. Maybe you can give that person the opportunity to take some initiative in the way that they learn, and to teach other people that this is a great way to communicate and a great way to learn. And maybe some more people could embrace it. That's going to make even more communication among your team, not just, team member to leader. So
and you might already have something,
Yeah.
For us, we talked about, someone mentioned Slack, and my team looked at me like I had 8 heads, because they say, well, we've been using Google Chat for the last year and a half. Why don't you start using Google Chat? And I thought, oh, I never thought about that. So sometimes you may have an alternative already in your possession that maybe you're not using, especially if you're using the Google Suite, you probably have it. But I love that idea of, again, goes back to that image of, we have a space in between where everybody's supposed to be contributing ideas to, right? It isn't just top down. I think those are in my opinion, the worst run companies, because then everything is either forced from the top down without any feedback from the front lines or input. And then it's just, well, I'm the boss. I got my manager cape on and my manager name tag, and I'm strong now. Versus creating a repository and saying, okay, here's our, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Okay, everybody, what do you think? And now all of a sudden someone goes, well, I think this, and I think that, and I think this, and we shake it all up. And then we, to your point is, we come up with an answer, and then we give everyone their marching order, so to speak, but making sure that everyone knows, when we leave this meeting, this is what you're accountable to do, and you know how to do it. And if you don't know how to do it, you have permission to come back and say, didn't want to take up the meeting, but I need some help figuring out how to do this. And then we work on that.
Yeah. And then you're getting input from your team, which is what you want. So it's not, 15 people on a Zoom meeting just listening to you talk. And then you're getting that, amazing creativity and diversity of ideas that is really going to help move everybody forward.
Yes.
And people have to understand that communicating in that way is a good thing, that contributing is going to be welcome, that their voices are going to be heard. It doesn't mean that every idea is going to be accepted. It doesn't mean that, they're going to knock it out of the park every single time, but just knowing that it will be received by the team members and by the leader in an open way is I think really the most that you can ask for in that kind of communication.
No, I think it's so important that, I always say we all should have healthy egos, but not egos that, block other people's opinions or something for consideration. Just because you're in a position doesn't mean you know everything. I've been told multiple times that, it sounds good in the boardroom or sounds good on that whiteboard, but down here on the front lines, you forgot to take X, Y, Z into consideration. You need that feedback in order to save time, save resources, speed up that process. Because another word that gets thrown around a lot is culture. Oh, we have a great culture. Well, culture is built through the day-to-day interactions of a company, not because you wrote something on a board that says, oh, that's our theme. And I think it all goes back to this idea of communication, being willing to listen, be curious about other people's ideas and opinions, and really want them. That why else did you hire them if you don't want their input on your team? That just always confuses me, why it becomes so one-sided.
Yeah, that good communication is not one-sided. It just isn't. That's not good communication. That is giving orders maybe, or managing in a way that doesn't take into account your team and the people you're speaking with, but that is not good communication. It's not good. It's not productive. It's not opening. It's not welcoming. It's
not
just
a conversation.
Not good. It is not. It is not.
So let me ask you that. So someone who's sitting here listening says, I'm new to this, or I don't think I'm really good at communicating. I get uncomfortable. stage fright. I'm not even talking about presentations, but you had mentioned earlier on someone just standing up in a meeting to deliver a report and their stomach is going, and I don't want to. What are some tactical tips besides coming to someone like yourself, which would be great. How does someone work at this? Because it is a skill. How does one get better at speaking?
Yeah, I think you need to understand, first of all, that everyone can learn to communicate effectively. Everyone can. This is not, a skill that people are born with and you get up and you're just natural. I've encountered a few, but they practice a lot, but that you're this natural storyteller and everyone's going to hang on every word. The people who get up who are like that are the people who have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours perfecting their craft. It's like playing a musical instrument. You do not expect that you're going to get up and play, a beautiful concerto on the piano, but you can learn. You can learn and you can get to a certain point where you feel comfortable doing something in the style that resonates with you. So some tactical tips. Say there's a meeting and you've got to give an update on something that your group is working on. So it's going to be maybe 3 to 5 minutes. That's it. But that sounds like a lot to someone who's really nervous. Yeah. It sounds like that's hours. So the first thing is prepare. There is so much that goes into it before you even deliver anything. So prepare. Know what it is you want to talk about. And I would encourage people to think about when you get up and you're going to be giving this update, say to yourself, this is a story about X. Can you complete that sentence? Just one sentence. Can you tell it to a 5-year-old or a 5th grader? If you can't do that, how are people going to understand? So this is a story about the creative things that my team has been working on in the past 2 weeks and where we want to take these initiatives. That's what it's about. So then that's your message. So you want to prepare. Anticipate what questions would be. Think about when you're getting up, 2 things that can make that presentation so great and make you so comfortable are knowing how you want to start, knowing how you want to end. And I don't generally encourage people to memorize things all the way down, but knowing and memorizing those first 30 seconds that are going to come out of your mouth and knowing and memorizing those last 30 seconds nearly guarantees that you're going to nail it, because people don't do that. They don't think about it. So think about that. What can be interesting to talk about? Maybe you're getting up and saying, I know everyone has been sitting here with bated breath, wondering what my team has been doing for the past 2 weeks, but you can release that breath now because I am here to update you. Right. Or whatever fits in, but know how you want to do that. Think about it in a way that feels creative, feels interesting, and it's going to kind of draw people in. Practice that. That helps with the nerves. If you hear the words coming out of your head, out of your mouth, and you hear them, you will get more and more comfortable. So the practice and the preparation cannot be overstated, because that's what you need to have for that confidence in getting up. But some tactical tips: you've practiced, you've prepared, you've figured out how you want to start and how you want to end. So you're making the most of those 2 times. Before you go on, you kind of want to center yourself before you head into that meeting. Take a couple breaths, maybe close your eyes, take 3 to 5 deep breaths, and just think to yourself, instead of thinking, I'm so nervous for this, I'm so nervous, reframe it. I'm so excited. Or I'm so excited because you are presenting some information that people want to hear. That's your point in getting up there. Right. Everyone always says, everyone wants you to succeed. Your audience is friendly. I found that while you can think that, it doesn't often help with the nerves, but it is about them. It's not really about you. So how can you take yourself out of it and think of it as just the message? What are you presenting? And you're presenting it in the best way possible. So the more time you spend before actually getting up there, the more comfortable and confident you'll feel when you get there. Another thing with nerves is to understand that it is good to have some nerves. Yes. If you have nothing, it tends to mean you don't really care. It's not important to you. You're not taking it super seriously. those nerves, when you get up, kind of convert to the adrenaline and the emotion that makes it more interesting. So that kind of reframing with a few deep breaths, getting up, and then going and just thinking, these nerves are good. They're going to make me interesting. They're going to make me better. The other thing that you can do if you are someone who just, none of this helps, no matter how much you do it, the nerves are so bad, is to get up. And when you get up, take a deep breath and do what we call kind of breaking that fourth wall, what comedians call calling the room, and just look around at everyone and say, I'm excited to be here and I am really nervous. So I appreciate if you bear with me, ask any questions you have, and just know that, I'm going to make it through this. I've been working really hard on it. I'm excited to talk to you, but I really have a lot of nerves.
Right.
And then you're going to find that people are with you. Sure. And if you even kind of tell your team before that, or tell your leader before that, I'm excited, I'm super nervous. Can you just give me a smile while I'm up there? Can you give me some eye contact? People are going to help you out with that.
Sure.
So I hope those help somewhat.
I think those are great because, again, they're very tactical. I think couple of those points reminded me, I speak, but I was an actor for a long time. And I remember a director used to say, it's all about the audience. It's not about you. And then when I started speaking, I became friends with a very successful, keynote speaker. And he always said, if you're worried about if they're going to like me, then you're focused on yourself. He said, as soon as you hit that stage, it's all about them. And he said, to your point, you should be excited. They've asked you to be here. They've asked for you to be on this stage. But the question you have to say is, what am I sharing with them? What am I teaching them? It's not about if they like me. I have a message to give to them. Again, I had a boss who used to always in conversation say, what's point B? What's point B in this conversation? Meaning, what are we going to learn? Why are you communicating this? What's important? So to your point, having that moment and practice, I cannot agree with you more. We've all been in presentations at conferences where someone races through the last 20 slides because they didn't pace themselves correctly. And people have asked me, I said, I practice my presentation. I time it. I practice it. I save time in case the projector goes dead. I said, in case they have a lot of questions. So there's strategies to do that. But I think to your point is that if you practice it enough times and know your information, be it that you put it on bullet points and you say, here are the 4 things I want, and keep it simple too, not 20, 4, communicate, and then let them ask questions and they'll go get the other ones that they want. That and those tactical tips of breathing and looking around the rooms, those are all magnificent. And again, for all of you who are, even if you're a seasoned professional, I will tell you, none of you are practicing as much as you should be, because I've sat in your workshops and y'all could get a little better.
It is so true. I mean, I have to say, I was never one when I was in court as a prosecutor to probably practice as much as I should have, because there was so much emotion involved all the time. I would practice kind of my like I said, my first, 30 seconds and my last 30 seconds, I would have cold. And then that gives you the opportunity to kind of ad lib and know where you're going with the rest. But now when I do give presentations, even ones that I have given 10 times, I practice.
Sure.
I find I go to the room if I can of where I'll be presenting. When I'm doing it on Zoom, I put it on presenter view, I time myself and I go through. When you hear those words, it is so different than how it is in your head, isn't it? Like the words coming out of your mouth are different. It's going to help you get better and better. And there are lots of sophisticated techniques that people can try. Sure. And once you get a little more comfortable, you can start doing those things. But 2 things you said really resonated. The first was slides. So, goodness, if you don't need slides, don't use them.
Oh, God.
If you don't need them, don't use them. First of all, it's a tech thing. So it's one more, if you're anything like me and you worry about, they're going to go wrong and what's the plan B. So it's one more layer of nervousness. Nobody really likes slides. You
No.
don't need them. You don't need them. The only reason I think people use them that much is, in the good sense for visuals or graphics that can really be helpful, videos maybe that you're playing that add to what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you who hasn't sat in a meeting or a presentation and someone pulls up the slides and the text is so busy over it, you can't read anything. And you know that the next hour of your life, it's just gone.
Or they sit
gone.
there and they read the slide.
They read
and
it.
I sit there
They
and I'm going,
read
why
it.
are you reading the slide? You could have emailed those to me, and what's your opinion of this? To your point is it should be graphs or assets that are going to help your situation. But to have these, it's just, and to your point, the other point is, especially people who have done presentations and you may be in a situation where you have to give them the same presentation 4, 5, 6 times. If you don't continue to practice it, you'll be surprised how much you take for granted and you cut corners, or you maybe weren't as clear, or you rush. Then you go back and practice and you say, oh my God, I skipped this whole section, or I forgot about this, or I wasn't as clear. So it literally is practicing it every single time, because that's the first time that audience is going to see you. So you want to make that great impression every single time.
Yeah, and you don't want it to get stale.
Mm-hmm.
And I figure you probably find this too. You'll give a presentation, you maybe get some great questions on the presentation. And what that starts to tell you is maybe there are a few holes here that I'm not covering.
Right.
And you can work in those questions. I had a great question at the end of a presentation that was, Laurie, you told us we have to have this start strong. I cannot say it enough times. Start strong, great introduction, ask a question, tell a story, end strong, leave your audience with something. But what do we do in the middle? What do we do in the middle to keep everyone's attention? I thought that was such a great question. And it led me to talk more about how you can put in those same introduction, conclusion, starting and ending in little parts as you move through your presentation, where you're doing the same technique. You can use videos, you can use graphics, how you want to, sprinkle those throughout to keep things moving. So it's not just your voice going on in the same way for 20 minutes. And now that's something I put into my presentation. And I talk about the fact that I got that question and how on earth did I miss that? How on earth did I miss that? And it's great.
It comes to the fact of, and you said it early on, and hopefully folks in the audience here don't take it for granted. But if you're telling a story, all great stories have a beginning, a middle, an end, or a beginning, another step, a struggle, a resolution, whatever the arc of that story is. And that presenter who I worked with, he would always say that. He goes, what's the story? So you have your beginning and you have your end. How do we get there? And how do we keep people engaged with a story? And there has to be some maybe struggle. There has to be some resolution. There has to be either some visual, some excitement that you're excited about, or else it's a boring walk for 45 minutes and nobody wants to go on a boring walk for 45 minutes. So when you start thinking of it that way, and I am a storyteller, I think that, as you said earlier, it's a great leadership skill, but we have to remember that even in those presentations, what do we want them to do with this information when they leave? If it's just entertainment, okay, well then that's what I want. But most of the time, we're giving these presentations or meetings because there's a purpose and we want our team to leave and do things. And if we don't understand that, they're definitely not going to grab it.
Right. And if you don't understand it and communicate it, you're leaving them to do something that you should be doing. And, when you were talking about kind of things to do to get away with, nervousness, to try to push that to the side and to give presentations where you feel a little less nervous getting up there. Right. You had talked about takeaways, or maybe I made that note, but talking about takeaways, what do you want them to do? What do you want them to take away? And that's another great way to be a little less nervous. If you have really consolidated, here's my update I'm giving at the meeting, and here are the 3 things that I want you to know and leave with today. Right. So when I am finished today, I want you to leave with these 3 things. And if you have any questions at all about these 3 things, we'll address that, as I move through or when I'm finished, but just narrowing it down, because if you're the one putting the information out, you're going to be able to talk about those 3 things, right? Off the top of your head, even
Yes.
if you haven't practiced enough. Those 3 things, your audience doesn't necessarily know those things. So you're really getting that knowledge there. And then when you finish, you can kind of bookend it a little and say, when I started, I let you know you were going to leave with these 3 things. So right now I want to show you're going to leave with these 3 things, and this is what you need to do with those. And, ask me any questions about those 3 things. And that way they can say you've told them, and then you told them what you're going to tell them, and then you repeat it again. But it's not kind of pounding the table with it. It's just embedding that information, because people are not coming to it with the same information you have.
Yes. And they're also not coming to, yes. And I think that's a key is remember, the information, they don't. Right. So we have to run that balance of making sure we're not assuming. And I think there is a danger. I love your opinion on it. I feel sometimes we don't want to communicate in that tactical way or very specific way, because people almost feel, well, they're adults. They should understand this. Or if I start talking like that, it could come across as condescending, when in reality, that's what everyone needs.
Well, I kind of think, what is showing your audience more respect than being really clear about exactly what exactly the information you want to give them? I mean, I think that, we talk about knowing your audience and creating that kind of connection between you and your audience. I kind of see that it's the opposite of being condescending. I think that's really showing immense respect for your audience to have taken the time before, and you're doing the work for them. You have taken the time before you get up in front of them to consolidate it, to make it really, really clear, so that there's no muddled thinking. It's super clear. You've told them, you're showing them, they leave with what they need. I think that is, so respectful of people's time. They're not there to do all that work. You're there to do the work and then present it. So I don't see it. I mean, I have not experienced a danger in that with the way that I've done things or seen things. I can't, think of that as being condescending. I really think it's respectful.
And I agree. I've gotten pushback from people when I'm saying no. And to your point, I've been saying, no, absolutely not. They don't know this. So you have to explain it to them. You're thinking that they're on the same level as you. So granted, if it's on the same level of you and we're equals and we work in the same department and we know our job, and you start telling me how to do something I already know, okay, then I can say, well, why are you doing that? But to your point is, they don't know anything about your department, or they have a high level understanding of what they don't understand, the day-to-day, the nuts and bolts, how you got there. That's why you're here to communicate it to them. So presenting it in a way that's digestible to them. To your point is, I think it's worse. It is. It's almost counterintuitive. It's condescending if I talk in a language that's way over your head using our code words in our department, and everyone's going, I have no idea what the hell this is. And versus someone mapping it out very clearly, and they take in that information, they go, oh my God, thank you so much. Very clear. Got what I need. Off we go. And everyone's happy. So, I think sometimes to your point is we misunderstand it. We look at it as, I agree. I think the way you phrase it is, it's the utmost respect, because I'm respecting your time. I'm respecting your viewpoint, where you came from to this meeting. And I'm doing it in a way that everybody wins, versus me feeling, oh, look how smart I am.
Right. And it's, like you've said before, it should be a conversation. It really should be a conversation. Even if you are doing the most of the talking during it, it should be a conversation. So we don't have to leave this up to chance. If these are, say, 1, 2, 3, I'm bringing this in, ask a question. Does anyone know what my team does in relation to X? Some of you may have some idea, and I want to be sure that you know exactly, and maybe even joke about some of it. Do you think that we're doing this? Or maybe you think we're doing that. Maybe there's some fun graphics you can do to kind of anticipate that kind of idea of a challenge, that this might be condescending in some way, to, just
I love
Meet it
that.
head on.
I think that's so great. I think everyone here to ask somebody the question of, because it level sets the room as well, because you may think they misunderstand you about X when in reality it's Y. But if all you're going to do is talk about X, they go, well, see, this is why I don't like that department. I think that's such a great tip and strategy, is to somewhere in the beginning, even before maybe you present. Let me ask you a question. What are you wanting out of this meeting from me? That's another great question.
Yeah.
You know, what are you looking for? I have some information here that I'd like to share. What are things that you want? I do that a lot of times in workshops. I'll have one of those big white pads, and I'll say, well, if I'm at a conference and there's 4 or 5 other workshops going on, I'm like, why are you in mine? Like, there's 5 or 6 other people here. What are you looking for? What questions are you looking for me to answer? To your point, I say, I'll throw these slides away. I'd rather talk about what you want to talk about.
Right.
And we've had better conversations that way, but it breaks down the barrier where all of a sudden the audience really does feel I'm there for them versus they're there for me. It's the reverse.
Yes. And how awesome is it to give them the power and the impact to have a say in what they're going to be learning, or the level at which they're going to be learning. I mean, in the best of all possible worlds, where you could send out surveys, you could know where everybody is, you could know everything. That doesn't often happen. But even using, say, a whiteboard, or using, I happen to love flip charts. They're very old school, but I love them, because then you are creating something together.
Yes.
And you're all in it together. It's not you with your slides and I'm very didactic and I know everything and I am going to instruct you. You're creating it together. And I love that. So I love the idea of you asking, what do you want to come away with today?
Right.
What
and then
are
when you
you
start
itching
crossing it
to
off,
learn about?
Yeah, when you start crossing it off and said, okay, well, we got Laurie's question over here. Anybody else? All of a sudden they see that progress of this is an interactive workshop. We're trying to figure things out. I have my viewpoint. I'll ask. And even if they're hesitant, there are, as you said, there are skills, more advanced skills where I'll just go, please don't make me point, because I will point out people and make you, and they laugh. And then all of a sudden people will start having conversations, and even doing that as the room fills up. Right. When somebody start coming in, you start having conversation right away. I always find the 10 minutes before your time is the best time to break down barriers, because there's only 2 or 3 people and they'll talk to you. Then people walk in and go, oh, I guess we talked to the speaker. And then all of a sudden you have it. But I think that's even great for meetings. To your point, goes back to the Zoom meetings. And I think the way, all of this wraps around is, I look at your background and I'm like, oh, what's that book on the back there? And now we start having conversations before the meetings. And then as other people come in, they join in and they realize that, well, we don't all have to be silent like school teachers, and be formal. And I think you have much more rich conversations.
You do. And you've made it a conversation. And Glenn, it's much like the skills we were talking about at the beginning of kind of being a good leader with your team. It really, you can extrapolate it to speaking, at a conference or speaking at a workshop or a presentation. You have shown that you are open to the curiosity of the people who are in that audience, who have chosen to spend their time with you, that you respect that, and that you want to make it worth their while. And that, to me, makes your audience incredibly receptive. And they want to be a part of it. And as a speaker, that's what you want. You don't want to be sitting up there pointing at slides with everybody just kind of staring at you. It's the worst.
That's the worst.
That is the worst. So,
but I think everyone, and I think this is a great place to sort of wind down the conversation, is all of this, you're always speaking, right? I think people make the mistake of, well, that's when I'm a speaker on stage, or I can't speak on stage, but yet you're having conversations with people throughout your day. We put the pressure on, this is an important conversation, or I'm presenting to my boss. But if I asked somebody about a sports team they love, they have no problem talking for an hour about it and get very passionate and having skills and arguments and data to prove why their team's better than my team. And I said, well, see, you're doing it here. you can do it over here. It's just you haven't made that connection or found the passion or found the way to communicate the data for that in the same manner that you have for your football team or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, people can be so comfortable talking about things that they love, and they get that energy and they're passionate about it. And then you tell them, oh, but you're going to talk in this meeting about what your group is doing. And all of a sudden the nerves, come in. It's the same thing. And we are always communicating, always. And it's not, even just the speaking. It's the way you walk into a room.
Yes.
It's the way you leave a room. It's the way you walk up to, if you're giving someone a handshake or having eye contact or not having eye contact, whatever it is, every single part of kind of being in the presence of someone else, you are communicating with some touch point there.
Yes.
So, even for people who may be nervous getting up, just think about, maybe you're not so nervous walking into that room. Maybe you see all your friends in there and your team in there and they're supporting you. So kind of take that with you, take that support with you that you've already kind of crossed off part of it, even just by walking in the room. You've crossed off part of that presentation, even by just standing up there. Yes. So, let that give you a little confidence too.
Man, I love this. I could talk to you for hours about this.
Me
this
too.
Is great. So this is great.
It's fun stuff, isn't it?
Well, it's very good. And I think for the audience who listens to the show, they need a lot of that, because even if they're veteran people who are managers or been leaders, it's still one of the hardest things that they struggle with is, am I talking too much or not enough? How do I get my point across? Why am I constantly repeating myself? So I think a lot of the content that we talked about today is going to give them some tools and strategies and tips for them to just go back and look at what they're currently doing, or the next time they have a meeting to say, well, wait a minute, did I practice this? Am I clear on my points? Should I ask them, what do you guys want out of this meeting? So many different tips. This was very, very jam-packed, and I appreciate that. So
it's been fun.
Good. So now is the time, like we say at the end of every show, I always give 4 or 5 questions. I call them the one. So it's the one thing that pops into your head. So first off, you said you had 15, 16, 17-year-old.
Yes.
Right. So they're a fascinating group of people that age.
It really is, isn't it?
They are. So for you though, looking back at yourself at that age and now where you are today, what's the one thing that you could say is still consistent? It was there when I was 16. It's still here now. And then the second piece is, what's the one thing that 16-year-old wouldn't believe if they could see me now?
Oh, wow. The one thing that is consistent is that I don't ever like being told what to do. I didn't like it then. And I don't like it now. That has not changed.
That's a great one.
And what would my 16-year-old self be surprised at? Well, my 16-year-old self would probably be very surprised that I currently live in Denver, Colorado with my family. I am a city girl. My dream was always to live in Manhattan, which I did for many, many years. I worked there. I lived there, started my family there, got married there. And then we had an opportunity to move out to Denver. And so now I live in Denver, Colorado, and I see the mountains everywhere. And we go hiking and skiing and all these things that I never really thought would be a huge part of my life. So I think she'd be surprised at that.
Yeah, we were just in Manhattan over this past weekend,
nice.
Getting back there. Yeah, I lived there for a long time as well. So it was nice to get back. Okay. What's one thing that you are reading, watching, listening to that is inspiring you that you would recommend to the audience?
Wow. Well, I am currently reading Daniel Pink's new book. He is a lawyer and a writer and comes out with all sorts of interesting kind of businessy books. But his new book is called The Power of Regret. And he interviewed something like 15,000 people about their regrets. And then he grouped them into different categories. And it is incredible. We all have regret. We all have some grief around chances that we've missed, the path not taken, things like that. And he just talks about the fact that, regrets are not bad. You need to have some regret. You can't kind of say, oh, no regrets, because then you haven't really used that regret to move yourself forward in life. So I'm finding it absolutely fascinating.
I will. That's great. That's a good one. I love him.
Give it a shot.
He's a great author. We'll link it. We'll link it in the show notes as well. Yeah. Okay. Where's one place that you would like to travel, but you've never been there yet?
I really want to go to New Zealand. I have wanted to go there and do the kind of Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji trip. And I really want to do that. So that's on my list.
All right. Yeah. So tied in with that, as someone who travels and has been, Have
you been there?
No, I have not yet. That's on mine. But for you, what's one thing that you need when you travel? What's the one thing you can't travel without?
Oh, wow. That is an excellent question, which I'm saying because I have to think about it for a minute. What do I need that I can't travel without? I need books. I need some sort of books when I travel. I think that, you go through really busy days and I like to kind of chill out at the end of the night, and I need to either have my Kindle or some sort of book to kind of recenter myself.
I was going to ask, are you a Kindle or need a real book?
I like the real books. Although I really prefer the real books, but I do use the Kindle just for convenience, that immediate gratification of getting the book and then being able to travel with it being lighter.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way I look at it. I'll try to bring one book with me, a physical one, but then sometimes they're really thick and then they're heavy and easier. I can have multiple books on my iPad. Okay,
but you gotta bring one book though, because what if the Kindle or the iPad goes? You gotta have something, right?
I always have one. There's enough of the small ones or middle-sized ones that I can always do that. Okay, so last question. We talked about a lot of things, and it has been a phenomenal conversation. If you thought to yourself and you said, man, out of all the things we talked about, if the audience got one thing out of this conversation, what would be the one thing you hoped they would take away?
I would want them to take away the idea that this stuff is doable, it's manageable, and it can enhance your life. And so in order to do that, I'd love for them to take away the idea of just be bold, be creative, and take some chances in your communication.
Love that. That is a great way to end. So thank you so much. So tell the audience how they can connect with you. Where do you hang out online? Where's the best way to reach out to them in case they'd like to chat with you and connect?
Sure. I would love to continue the conversation. You can find me through my website, which is Tribeca Blue Consulting. It's my old neighborhood, New York, where I used to live. You can reach me directly on there. There's a form. And I'm also on LinkedIn at Laurie Gilbertson. That is my main social media.
Great. Okay. So please do connect.
Yes.
I think it's great. A lot of the guests have had people reach out to them to have continue the conversation. So please do reach out. So thank you so much. This has been magnificent. I can't wait to go back through this again so I can take notes. I'm definitely going to have my team listen to this. This has been really a beneficial conversation. So I thank you so much. So audience, you know how we all end here. Please, if you found value in our conversation today, I know there's someone in your network that could benefit from this conversation. So please share this out with them, send it out to them, get them to connect, because we're found everywhere, wherever you listen to your podcast, be it Apple or Android, wherever you can find us, or you can go over to the YouTube channel and watch some of the video highlights of this. But again, please share this out. Really important. Everybody's conversation skills can be improved, and it really does benefit your life. I know there's a lot of places for you to consume content, but the fact that you spend some time with Laurie and me means the world to me. And as I say at the end of every episode, you're in charge. But when you get that feeling of now what? Now what do I do? Well, we're here every single week with great conversations and guests like Laurie today to give you some tactical tips to help you become the leader that you're looking to be. So thanks so much. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Laurie, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Glenn.